And welcome to our September 2022 edition of the Every Second Matters chat that started back in 2013 with the end of the year where Obama had started the year with his challenge, his 23 executive actions. And that kind of happened at a time when the industry was not unified or anything like that. So I think they probably felt, and I think I don't remember the politics at the time, but nobody was really paying attention. I think people were more worried about scarcity and just the development of some platforms and technology and things like that. CCW was becoming a bigger and bigger thing. So nobody was really expecting it. And when it happened, there wasn't any solidified resistance to the idea of the president using executive actions. And that was actually a pretty big deal. It was a new tactic, at least on the public front, to just, announce 23 executive actions designed specifically to attack the guns and stuff. So, and as a reaction to a criminal that is basically emulating, media, what the media would champion, or whatever the word is for, champion atrocities. So a mimic. So we had a year of, we didn't know what was going to happen. And what actually came down was that even though the year kind of started tentatively, by the end of the year, effectively the challenge was gone and people were kind of felt like they had accomplished something, although no one did this, no one just did something. Like everybody did their own thing, but it's not like we all did some recipe and that recipe worked. Everyone just felt like whatever happened, it was, accomplished, and let's move on. And some of us who are having these conversations kind of from the, I don't know, just, constantly having conversations focused on 2A, we knew that there was an apathy kind of hitting the scene. Like we'd never seen the kind of enthusiasm and grassroots awareness that there had been during 2013, and it was palatable. You could tell it was dissipating. And some of us that were creating content or paying attention to the content was being created on like YouTube or Instagram, we could tell that the focus was changing because there was less and less attack from the adversaries. And we knew that this was a cycle that we were doomed to repeat, especially if we became a mechanism and we literally just laid down as soon as the attack was over. So if we some of us just didn't want to become a mechanism. So we decided, what can we do to do something? And after, I think about 3 long discussions specifically on this concept, we came up with the idea, and we had a lot at the time. It was a very interesting group of people. I'll get into it because I just downloaded one of the first sessions, but we had a bunch of students at the time. And those students were younger than all the rest of us. So that was interesting, but they were also in different schools around the country. So we had, part of it, we were aware of the Students for Concealed Carry, which was a thing back then. The student awareness and the student Second Amendment stuff, just as an aside, comes and goes because most people are only students for a few years. And then maybe they're alumni, but almost nobody cares about the school once they leave it. So it's very difficult for a student organization to thrive more than a few years, as long, as while a few major people are in it. So we knew that these organizations had come and gone, and we knew that students, being at the time, the people that were going to be taking the baton as gun owners, the apparent baton as gun owners, and I guess technically they're still the same people, just a little bit older. Maybe the people that weren't in our conversations, those same generation of people are the people that are the new gun owners today. Anyway, we knew that they deserve more than just all the people who had accomplished whatever had happened in 2013. Again, it's not like anybody could take a snapshot and say, here's what we did in 2013. Just a lot of stuff happened and a lot of people participated in it. And we could tell that momentum was fading. So we came up with this idea to do something on the 2nd of the month. At first it was like the 3rd Thursday. And then I can remember the conversation where it changed to the 2nd of the month. And it was the debate because the 2nd of the month swaps all around. The 3rd Thursday is the 3rd Thursday. Everybody can plan on it, but the 2nd, you can't. The 2nd is literally at the whim of the calendar. Some people thought that was the best thing ever, and some people didn't like it. Well, here we are 13 years later, and people have carried the tradition in different ways. we built the thing in the tradition at the time of Pink Pistols. So in 2013, Pink Pistols was an entity that existed as a concept and then a website. And the concept was, if you're LGBT, whatever, then arm yourself. And if you want to claim that you're Pink Pistols, awesome. If you want to use that like banner, feel free. But there was nothing to join. There was no organization, no membership. Nobody had to do anything. There was barely a website. It was just a website to offer the information. And we thought that was a great mode or whatever. Like, there's nothing to do. There's no structure here other than to clarify that there is nothing to do and that there's nothing to join, so that nobody can jump up and say, oh, here's the rules. Like, there are no rules. It's just to do something on the 2nd of the month, right? Something cool. Don't be an asshole, right? So some people choose to wear an open holster. Some people choose to wear like a t-shirt or something, maybe a gun shirt or something that starts a conversation. And most people do something to create a conversation, or maybe take somebody to the range and like offer awareness, something so we can appreciate what our Second Amendment protects. All those times, all those months when there's nothing knocking at the door, there's nothing pounding on the door, there's no imminent danger. And every once in a while, when there's been those times when it's times of stress or times of concern, or usually just concern, we don't know what's coming and something's coming, but we don't know what. Those are times when it's I believe it's useful for people to come together with people that have been around for a while, paying attention to this stuff, and offer a live conversation like this. At least what I do is the live conversations like this, but mainly the community that's created by Every Second Matters. There's all kinds of different things that happen, or people that do it in different ways. But knowing that there's people that are paying attention is, something hopefully that offers something as a resource. So all these years later, on the 2nd day of the month, whenever I can, I post a room like this. I invite as many Second Amendment advocates as I can. And the idea is to bring people together in a roundtable type discussion. And instead of talking about news of the day, talk about our conversation, our advocacy, and how we can move forward, how we can be less of a mechanism and more of an example for other realms. Maybe people that are trying to help veterans transition out of the military, or people that are helping to get neighborhoods, fresh vegetables or something, like how to, lead the way in showing how to cooperate and create organization and education and awareness that defeats our adversaries, not because we figured out a better way to, ninja stab them, but instead a way to stop the fight by educating the people that they're taking advantage of to abuse us. With that being said, I've invited 33 something odd people in, and I don't know if it's because it's a Friday or if it's a holiday weekend or what, but Edgar joined us from Guns for Everyone. Thanks for jumping in from Colorado.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invite.
You bet. And sometimes people jumped in later, whatever. I give the invite. I hope I put the right link in there, but I usually tell people in the invite, join in for as long or as short as you want. I typically, just so you know, I don't invite everybody that I know. That would take forever, and there's only 12 slots in this. And, it definitely become a spam letter. I spend it out to 33 at this point. Typically people that either haven't jumped in very often, or that would be interesting mix to an eclectic Second Amendment conversation. But also I try to go with people that have a perspective and a position and are able to have a conversation, because there's a lot of people that just like to bring other people's positions or bring the established conversation to the table. And we already know that one, so I'm trying to not necessarily feed the flames and create controversy, but just bring in some different folks so that we have not just the same conversations louder, but new conversations.
Correct.
So some people have asked why I invite some people and others. I'm not necessarily looking for controversy. I just want to move the conversation, because, when they talk about the echo chamber, Jeff Knox does a great conversation or a great reply to that. But the echo, or they talk about the choir, singing to the choir.
Yeah,
preaching to the choir. Yeah, maybe I think of singing to the choir. So I guess preaching to the choir is how it's supposed to be. But anyway, that whole idea is that, or he brought up that if you don't practice as a choir, then you'll never sing right. You'll just sound like a bunch of amateurs. So you do have to. It's important, and you can make use of these conversations, but I think of it then as practice. If we're going to have these conversations and we're going to talk about the same old thing, then let's practice. And every once in a while, practice means let's stress ourselves, let's give ourselves a challenge. And then every once in a while, try something new, right? If you're trying to be a better jazz singer, every once in a while, sing rock and roll or sing gospel or something, right? Like get a better repertoire. And at the same time, we need to understand our adversary. So again, bringing, just saying the same old stuff isn't necessarily a great thing, but getting in there and practicing, I think, is good, because then we're just better conversationalists and better to express our positions when it's important.
Correct.
Anyway, so I had a couple of questions for today. We got a bunch of people watching us live, so I do appreciate the people that show up live. Kingpin was out there, 500 Magnum, Chiba, then Jason, and then me a bunch of times. And then I think if I'm missing anybody, Chris is out there, Tactical FUD, and Enrique Sonora from out here in Tucson. So going back, I created a couple of questions here just because I thought I was going to be sitting here by myself for a while. So thanks for jumping in. But I can ask you the questions too now. But these are questions for anybody who's joining us. We got a bunch of people joining in on a couple of different channels and platforms out there. First one would be, how do we, and this was, as people jump in, I'll just keep asking people the same question, but I'll ask Edgar now. How do we, people in 2A, Second Amendment advocates specifically, how do we navigate this election cycle differently in 22 and then in 24? Because I'm sure some of this is just strategic for the 24.
From a 2A perspective?
Yeah, as activists, like how can we handle ourselves, or how can we strategize to be better and just not the same old, right?
Well, we've done a horrendous job at choosing leaders that support the Second Amendment, right? So, and this is tough for humans because we have other interests and we have other stuff that we might also want protected. I'm a freedom guy. I've never shied away from being a true anarchist, somebody who doesn't like government overall. But when I see people in the 2A choosing leaders, like it boggles my mind that people want Trump again when he's already proven that he's weak on the Second Amendment. And I know that his biggest thing was the bump stocks, and a lot of people are like, well, it was just bump stocks. Like we know how that goes. We know that story. It just starts off with just one thing. And also he didn't really protect the Second Amendment. So he had 2 years to really make it strong and powerful and make it unshakable. And he went backwards. And the fact that there's a lot of gun people, quote unquote gun people, that are wanting his re-election and wanting him to come back is kind of mind-boggling. So I think we often complain about losing our rights, but we also elect leaders because it's the lesser of two evils, which is still evil. And the other thing is, well, he may not be strong on guns, but maybe he's good on the economy. Well, if we understand that the guns is what keeps us free, then we understand that that's probably one of the primary reasons why we should be voting and attacking this election a different way. And that's looking for people that are actually going to protect the Second Amendment, understanding that that's kind of our last resort and kind of our way of maintaining any financial stability that we have, or any freedom with our commerce and our bodies and our health and our whatever, right? It just it's kind of mind-boggling that we keep falling into that trap of well, they're Republicans, so they're gonna help us out, and that's just not the case.
By habit, I mute here because I got so many fans running. So there's nobody here to contradict or have a discussion so much. So as far as I know, gun people for sure, because it's hard to say gun people. I definitely put a line between 2A. When I say 2A, I'm thinking like people who I know who are pretty much worried about rights and stuff, and then
Correct.
shoot a gun once in a while. And then there's a whole bunch of other people that shoot guns constantly, or in the industry, or just are interested in guns as a hobby or a collection or whatever. And they're gun people, right? Like I'm a motorcycle person. I'll look at a motorcycle and go, oh, it's neat. I like that one, or I don't like that one. If you ask me which one they are, I don't know. I don't care. Is there laws against motorcycles? I don't know. There probably shouldn't be, but there might be. I don't care, right? Because they're not affecting me.
Correct.
So that's how I think of 2A and gun people. The gun people probably know that there's laws, but they couldn't tell you the they usually can't tell you the NFA from the GCA, the gun
Oh,
control,
yeah.
the 68 from the 34. They know that there's a difference between them, and they know what they are usually, but they can't, and they couldn't point out Amanda Suffolk from Shell Todd, right? Like they just don't know what's going on right there. So when I think of 2A, I don't think any of them like Trump. I think some of them are okay. Definitely some of them are okay with Trump or dig him. But I think most 2A people, are like way past bump stocks and the take them first, the whole red flag bullshit, take them first, right second.
That
That
was
pissed off a lot
insane.
of people. And I'm thinking the gun side, that's just everybody that owns a shotgun or whatever. I was talking about this, I don't know, the other day, yesterday maybe, that in one of my chats, that I went to an anti-gun rally in Phoenix, which I did go to it. It's like an hour or something, 2 hours from Tucson, to go to this rally a couple years back. And we went there, we stood around, and I had been to plenty of pro-gun rallies on the same exact place. And this thing was the scale at 10 times larger, way larger, just like a parade. It filled the streets. We got to hear them and yell, they're yelling and screaming, they were loud, and they had banners and stuff. You could see everything. They hated guns, but what they hated was Trump, and guns were the flavor of the day. So if you would have said to them, I'll give you $5 to put up "I hate Trump" sign, they would change in a second. Guns was just the flavor of the day. I'm sure all of them individually could have been talked about with guns, and they would have had maybe some different ideas, but all over the spectrum versus they all hated Trump. So I'm just getting at, I know that the same thing happens on the other side. There's people that could care less about Trump, but if it pisses off that 18,000 people, they're pro-Trump. And if all they got to do is put on a red hat and piss off a bunch of people that way, you know what I'm saying? That's the people that are the sports players. Like, oh, this is my colors. This is my colors, right?
Well, where I grew up, we call them gang members, but yes.
You know what I'm saying? But it's at the national level. It's all kind of friendly and like, I'm going to put this on, and I don't know. And that's the thing that think of how many memes. Ever since you can look at old Civil War pictures that are effectively memes, and everybody knows that's the charade. That's the what do they call it? The curtain that the Wizard of Oz is all about.
Correct.
Like that's the fight that they give us, the puppets or whatever they say. Like that's to keep everybody distracted while they're playing the bigger games or whatever. And that's where I think that, at least in the last few years, and I could be dissuaded because it's been a few years that I've been having this opinion now, but as I saw the frenzy, it seemed like, kind of lead up to some of these things and the lack of actual effort on their side, I got the impression that they understand that they're losing the old paradigms. Like they don't have the same old ways to control everybody. They don't have just the 3 networks, for example, and there's not just a few news organizations that people follow. So they can't really keep the narrative out there like they used to. So I kind of figured they're trying to do this last stuff while they still have the ability, but you give it 2 more elections, I thought even 1 more election, and there's just no chance that like NBC or CBS or CNN or any of these people are going to have any influence. But I don't know. Am I wrong? Or do you think those kind of entities will continue on through all this, or will all the stress and the weirdness of the last couple of years just have broken all the tradition, reputation that those organizations kind of? Because I think they have the reputation with our parents, but our children could care less about them, right?
And I don't think that's because of them being ethical or unethical. I wish people would see them for what they were, and I wish we could sit here and say, "Oh, CNN is irrelevant," or "NBC is irrelevant," or any news organization that's highly biased is irrelevant because they suck. But the reality is, I think that's just news in general, right? I think that old format of TV and presenting news is just going away, because we're just consuming media very, very differently. So I agree that it's going away. I just wish it was going away for the right reasons and not going away because that's just where we're at. Where with technology and advancements. And
you mean like if people would have woke up and said no thank you, as opposed to it just losing its technical ability to have the stranglehold?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
no, I agree with you. Like awakening versus it just slipped hold, because that leaves us open to the same vulnerability you're saying.
Exactly. So now we're consuming the same media, but in a different fashion, in a different form. So I'm just pleased that CNN and NBC have not learned how to adapt to the technology and the changes. And we've seen it with their apps failing and their streaming services failing and not doing all that well. NBC is probably a little bit more powerful just because it has a brand behind it, or MSNBC. So it's got a network. CNN not as much, so it failed a little bit easier. But yeah, like I just hope that this next generation does really open up their eyes and the not what is it, we're in Zoomers now, I think is where we're at, Gen Z. I've been highly impressed. We're talking about like the young 20-year-olds that are coming up. I've been impressed by a lot of them on how awakened they are. Maybe they don't agree with me 100%, but they're definitely catching on to the bullshit of CNN and MSNBC. Again, it's not a huge population, but it still kind of gives a little bit of hope that maybe at some point they lose credibility because they suck, not because they didn't learn how to adapt to the technology. So I have a little bit of hope for that, but um it's either way, it's nice that that type of information is kind of going away, the propaganda and the biased stuff, and which, by the way, I don't agree with on either side, right? Like I try and fight that as much as I can, on both sides, not just on the lefty side.
Well, yeah, there's needs to be a filter from both sides. Clover, you've heard that. I don't know if you heard the question before you jumped in, but you've heard the question before for sure. We've had the conversation for years.
What's that? Oh, hey Edgar. By the way,
Hey,
good
how's
to
it
see
going?
you. No,
Good
I
to
was
not see you guys.
right. Um, no, I was looking for my headset, so yeah, I guess I missed the question. So what was the question? Oh, okay. How do we navigate the election cycle?
Oh,
Man,
sorry, I'm muting myself. Sorry. How do we navigate the election cycle differently in 22 and 24? And then it evolved into the old question of when is the stranglehold of the networks going to lose to the freedom of the internet? So if you want to tackle both of those.
I think it's already lost. I think what we're seeing is like somebody that's drowning, right? The last flails of them, whatever, trying to uh, get above water or whatever. I think Edgar's right. I think that we know this, where we're talking about the establishment politicians, we're talking about legacy media, and we see this even within the firearm community and that media space, right? Like those people are like old tech. Like they don't understand new tech. They don't understand. They're so far removed, right? Like I'm in a position, and I think all three of us are here, and there's quite a few of us that are this way. Like we're in the middle, right? We're not so far removed that we don't at least partially understand it, right? And we're not so far removed that we can't learn, right? And I think more importantly, we're not so entrenched in things that we don't want to learn. And I think it's a combination of all that when you talk about establishment types, not only the political structure but the media structure. So yeah, that's falling and that's failing. Now, I think even as we get more of the younger crowd into politics, into the even what we consider the mainstream media or we think of, right? I tend to call it legacy media because that's more what it is. I think the dynamic's going to change there. Um, Edgar was mentioning CNN. You're seeing some shakeup at CNN. Now, does that make it flip from a left wing propagandist to a right wing propagandist, or does that keep its interest? Who knows where it goes, right? But I think the point is we're already seeing that. We're already seeing the ramifications and the shakeups there, right? And then when we look at the younger crowd, I've been saying this for a long time. Of course, I've got many years working with kiddos, so I see it. And sometimes we look at them, and yes, they're still under their mom and dad's wing. They still live in the house, whether that's late years of high school, early years of college, maybe even out of college for a few years, and mom and dad still kicks in and helps with the rent or whatever the case may be, right? But eventually, and it's human nature that you rebel, right? You rebel against whatever it was. If you brought up in a super religious household, odds are you're going to rebel eventually. You might come back to that religion later on as you grow up. And then maybe the opposite is true. Maybe you grew up in a household, and I'm just using religion as an example. You could call it political party, whatever, right? Was seemingly with that adolescent, that younger attitude, those things were forced upon you, right? And then you get out in the world and you start rejecting everything that you've learned, everything that you've been taught. And so I think we see a combination of things. I think we see people that had a more conservative upbringing, and they want to reject that simply because that's just the nature of everything. As they grow up, as they experience the world, though, they start to wake up. And then you see directly the opposite happen with these people that they don't want to be under the thumb of their parents. They don't want to be under the thumb of their teacher, right? Well, our politicians, and that's what they are. They're not leaders. This whole BS when people call them leaders makes me sick to my stomach. There are elected representatives. They are politicians. And what gets me is this dynamic that has been created over time where politicians are like the parents, right? And they view the populace as their children. Like, we know what's better. We know what's better for you. We know what's good for you. We're here to take care of you, right? And so as that dynamic becomes more and more apparent, that also, I think, plays into the younger people, right? And that rebellious nature. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. What are you pushing on me? What are you telling me? No, just no. And I see that a lot within the firearm space and 2A specifically, right? I see kids coming up that are like, what is this crap about? And they don't even understand firearms like lifelong firearmers do, right? They don't understand a lot of the nuances, but still, they immediately recognize that magazine capacity bands, right? It's like, what difference does that make, right? They immediately realize that this whole idea that a 9mm blows a long out, right, is garbage. They pick up on that really quickly. They got really good BS filters.
Sorry. So I'm typing to take notes because I think I'm better off when I do these things to take some notes, and I post them over on Substack as just a way to get some of the, I don't know, make it more sticky because we do cover so much direction, so much ground on these things. So you kind of answered it by saying that the kids I'm kind of summarizing it, but they're savvy enough to understand the BS and see that the politicians are trying to take that parent role. So my question would be to both you guys. Do you see the next gen rebelling in the way of like, I'm just going to do it and not talk about it, or I'm just going to do it anyway? Like that kind of rebelling, like I'm just going to break the law effectively, or rebelling like, how dare you? And let's be run for office and let's remove these and a lot of other stupid laws and let's change the way politics is by taking it over, like, taking possession, like owning it. How are they going to react to the being offended? Because I agree with you, I think.
So I think here in Texas, it's going to be different everywhere, right? So the answer to that initial question of how do we deal with the elections, it's going to be different wherever you're at, right? In some places, I mean, you need to get the D's out and the R's in. And I'm not a D or R guy or whatever, but I mean that's just the options that you have and what you're going to have to do. Here in Texas, it's a little bit different. It's more, we got to get even the R's. We've got to get the establishment out. Like, we don't have a huge problem with being able to bat down to knock away what, liberals, Democrats, whatever, try to push. But the problem is we can't gain ground in anything because some of the entrenched Republicans. So we've got to shift in that. To answer your question though, G, real quick, that way Edgar can jump in. I've already seen it. I've seen it over the last couple of election cycles on a local level here. I've seen 20-something-year-olds, 18 to early 20-something-year-olds running for city council, running for mayor, running for, and that's where it starts. Let's be honest. They get into those positions, they cut their teeth, right? And then they can kind of move up from where. We all kind of know politics is this progression. So, you don't want to take a 20-year-old and run him into Washington, D.C. You want him to cut his chops a little bit, or her to cut their chops a little bit. And the local level is where that can take place. And they got a better shot, honestly, at local level as well.
Yeah, I do see them as being more willing to break the law, at least push that envelope a little bit
Well,
more.
let's put it this way: the crazy new rulings
Yeah.
and interpretations that aren't law. So let's make it clear that they're not saying let's just break laws.
Correct.
They're just unwilling to comply with new rulings. So I just don't
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
word. Yeah. Thanks.
But even with laws, I mean, even with those, but yeah, like the whole Bryce thing that's going on right now, and the frames and all that. So I think they're a lot more willing to push that envelope a little bit more, push the issue a little bit more, understanding that there's got to be a purpose behind it, right? It's not just pushing for the sake of pushing. It's pushing for the sake of freedom and pushing for the sake of making a statement. But I definitely do see it a lot more in the generation that's coming up, which again, it's a good thing to see. It's something that I appreciate. I think even more willing than my generation to push that envelope a little bit more. We tend to believe that our generation is that generation of not taking any bullshit, but I think we give ourselves way too much credit on all that stuff, because our generation accepted the well, part of our generation, right? Depending on how old you are and all that stuff, where you fall and all that stuff. But our generation seen the assault weapons ban, and our generation seen the stuff that the Bushes did early on, and even some of it with Ronald Reagan, right? So and I'm talking about slightly older generation than me, but like we put up with a lot, and now we're trying to fix it. So we're trying to correct this, where we're trying to make it better, and we have taken a step back in terms of getting rid of some stuff, right? The Bruin decision really helped us out. But even before that, state by state, we were kind of regaining those rights back. But a lot of this is happening because that younger generation is willing to stand up and use quote unquote the cancel culture against them. And they're doing it pretty stealthy. They're doing it pretty low key. They're not doing it with a huge backing. A lot of it is just they're up against the cancel culture, the actual one, while using their tactics and their savvy to kind of infiltrate all this stuff. So it's kind of genius to see. It's kind of awesome to see in the background and the working, because it's, if it continues on that track, hopefully it does what it's supposed to do, and it works out a lot better than what we've done before, which is let's just try old techniques, and let's just do the talking points, and talking points are going to get us out of this, and all that shit, which it doesn't.
Man, Triggerology has a good one there. So when we're talking about if they're going to break the law or run for office, I think Clover, and you talked about, where that depends for sure, right? Because some people are in California, I'm assuming. I mean, I know what it's like. I grew up in a state where it's shitty. So I fled when I was old enough to be able to, because I didn't want to deal with it. And as an individual, I couldn't, plus those other reasons, right? So I moved as a youngin'. But so I understand the people that are growing up with that weight and that resistance, right? They're going to be motivated to a whole nother level. They also might be frustrated at a whole nother level when they've, when it seems like it's overwhelming odds. I like to think, though, there are definitely some, you don't have to look hard. You can find examples of wins, right? For the underdog, or for the individuals who stand up and do it. It's not every time, it's not a guaranteed win, but I think there's enough wins to be motivational. But as far as like the pushing things, I think, and you kind of mentioned using the cancel culture against the people who use the cancel culture as a weapon. I'm thinking of that as like hacking 2A. Like
Yeah.
we're figuring out ways to accomplish a lot through not necessarily just one method, right? And I don't know, is that something that can be orchestrated? Do you think that's something is kind of off the topic, but since we kind of got towards this, do you guys think that this, you guys have both heard me, I think, talking about hacking 2A or coming up with some system that we can hand down that this protects our rights, right? Like this is a way to protect our rights. And I don't mean like, I mean just a combination of the soapbox and the ballot box and all that kind of crap, right? So here's something that can protect us by, you know, some strategies to work together and to resist. Is that something that we've got on the horizon, or is that on the far horizon?
So I don't think it's orchestrated. I think it's just happening, right? Because these people have the.
Oh no, I think it's fallen together too. I think it's the same way that good code comes out of a bunch of people having interest. The code's there, and people open source it, and it happens, right?
Correct. Absolutely. But it's not necessarily coordinated. It's not necessarily people just take interest in, and so I think it's just happening organically. And I think it's going to happen a lot sooner than we expect. And for me, anyways, somebody who's a nihilist and somebody who is not necessarily very optimistic about the 2A and what we can accomplish. I've been very vocal about how pessimistic, in fact, I am about the 2A, how stagnant it is. But I've been pleasantly surprised on this new generation and the turn that they're taking. And I see it in classes. I see that new generation come in. So I think it is happening organically, but at the same time, like all of that stuff kind of comes together. The fear there is that it now becomes kind of the new FUD at some point as they get older and as they get worn down and as they get bitter and get off my lawn attitude and all that stuff. So it's this how do we continue rejuvenate the ESL is kicking in. You know what the fuck I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Reinvigorating this new generation. I would just use a different word. That's my tactic my whole life as an ESL person. I can't say, just use a different word. Reinvigorate the new generation and keep it fresh. Because that's business, that's tech, that's everything. Is if you stay old and if you stay in that old mindset, you can't adapt to that stuff. So I don't think it was orchestrated. I think it's organic, but it's naturally coming together.
I definitely agree. I don't want to interrupt if Clover's got something to say on this, but then I don't disagree that it's organic. But I guess my question is, how do we influence so that even though it's organic, we can stimulate it or make it happen when it needs catalyst, give it a catalyst. I don't know. Did you want to answer that one, Clover? Do you want to think about my kind of theory of hacking 2A? Will that happen sooner or later? Will it happen with somebody orchestrating it, or like we're saying, kind of just happen?
I agree. I think it already is, and I think it's happening organically, and everything happens in cycles, right? We always talk about history repeating itself. What's funny about that, if you look at the rebellion that went on in the 60s, all of those hippies are now the old codgers in political office that are keeping everybody else down, right? And they're doing the exact same things they fought against. And now you've got this flip, right? The cycle has come around. And, I think, just like they were able to, seize power, get into places of position, change the world, so to speak, back then, I think it's gonna happen again. And if you look back even then, I can't point to anything and say there was this grand orchestration with that, the freedom and love and whatever movement of the 60s. I can't look back and identify anything. Now maybe somebody who lived it during that time and lived it, maybe they could, but me just going back, I don't see, it looks organic. So, while yes, I think there are things we can do on a micro or maybe a macro level, right, to help it along. I think we've got to let it work organically. And that's a big problem because that in this day and age, especially, the vast majority of people lack patience.
All right, I mute and I'm trying to finish typing and I don't type good and I have to let my robot respell everything. So sorry for the lag there. But no, I think that's a great point too. Glad you added that last point that we really should let it happen organically because even any influence is like sticking your finger in a Petri dish. It's going to screw with it somehow, right? Like let it, even if it's not perfect, at least it happened. And then that becomes an experience for the next permeation of it or whatever, like, oh, if you do it this way, it screws up. So try to do it again, but try not to do it that way, right? I think I was going to add to this that, as Edgar was saying, I'm trying not to interrupt and interrupting, I'm trying not to interrupt to make points, but it reminds me of when my experience from military stuff is that, like, let's say Nam and Korea days, the concept was shut up and deal with it. And then you had a lot of PTS. And then they figured out what that was. And now they've figured out methods and strategies to alleviate that from happening in the first place. And now it's not so much a thing. And that when people have it, they're able to deal with it, right? Or at least a lot differently and hopefully better than in the old days. And I think that that's the kind of thing we see in 2A, where, we can kind of hand that down, where before a lot of the hazing and the other stuff was because they didn't have a good way to say, you're going to need to go to hell and back. So I'm going to take you to hell and back right now to make sure you're not going to fold when you're really in hell and back. And, when we're, we get jaded over and just scarred from being in the battles, right? And in 2A, it's just different types of battles. It's not real battles, but, it's just getting into the trenches and finding out, that person was only here to really make money on this. And as soon as it got tricky and difficult, they withdrew all support and left. And now I'm standing here taking the brunt of all the political heat, and they're off with wiser and more stronger financially for the next time that they can make some money. And when you get kind of brazen to that, you're less and less interested in giving the next person your what's that called? Like, being, anyway, so you can, there's these kind of cycles. And I think we can, by communication and collaboration, we can eliminate a lot of that than having to wait for it organically to all somehow, maybe it'll happen, or maybe it'll shuffle and, we'll have a good group of people that work together. I think we can come up with ways to, I don't know how to explain it more than that, but I think that that's something that we can maybe parallel from military experience over time. All right, so the next question would have been along the 2A side. I'm scrolling way back up to my questions up here. And these questions, whoever's watching this live, you are able to answer these for free. We worked it out with YouTube. You can answer these questions in the comments if you want. So I'm going to ask Edgar and then Clover, what skill sets do Second Amendment advocates need in 2022? What would you recommend? If you're a Second Amendment advocate, what would you recommend they arm up with skills-wise?
I think one of them is the willingness to put in the work, because it's tiring. If you're a serious activist, right? If you're a serious person that's actually passionate about this stuff. I'm not speaking to the casual crowd. I'm speaking to the people that actually want to be in the fight. The endurance and the willingness to just fight. I think everything else, to be honest with you, kind of comes with, right? Like at first you're not that intelligent. You say a lot of dumb shit. I know it's true for me and it's true for most of us. And the longer you're in it, the more you start to absorb how to attack, how to say stuff, how to approach situations, and you do it more tactfully and just like everything else that comes with age and that comes with experience. What I see the most with a lot of these people is they're in it for a month or two and then they get tired and then they take time off and they blame everything on family and then they're no longer involved. We often laugh when people hear that Guns for Everyone's been around since 2010. To me, that's not a long time. It really isn't. but often people laugh like, "Wow, you're the old guys on the block." And then there's people that have been around since the early 2000s, and that's really only 20 years. And to think that 10 to 20 years is a long time in the gun community, that just gives you an example of how tiring it can be, because most organizations I've seen in the 12 years that we've existed, I've seen organization after organization come up and just almost instantly fold, and it has nothing to do with um, their ideas or anything other than they just couldn't execute. They just did not have the drive to put the work in. They were in love with the idea of being activists, but they did not want to put the work in. And I think that's true for anything that you want to do. It's just very basic. A very basic thing is if you run a business and you're not willing to work it, it's not going to work. You can't say I want to run a business and take 15 vacations a month, and then 3 sick days, and expect it to work. It's just not going to work out. This is tiring. I don't have to tell you, G Webs, you've been doing this shit since the early 2000s, almost fucking daily. It's tiring, and you don't see too many people that are willing and passionate to put the work in, and that's disheartening. That kind of breaks my heart.
It's like an expectation thing, right? Because if your expectation is to go another day, then it's not that hard. But if your expectation is to win, then it can be draining, right? Because there's never there's mild wins, but there's never finish lines where everybody takes a break and forgets about it and remembers old times and then has to rally up and fight again 8 years later. It's more like you're saying, constantly.
Yeah.
Clover, how would you answer that one? What skill sets does Second Amendment advocates need in 2022?
So I think first of all, I mean, the work ethic that Edgar's talking about, because I'm going to go a little different route with this, because I think that because most people are apathetic, most people are lazy. There's an old saying that, you got to meet people where they're at. I don't think that's true anymore. I think we have to meet people 60, 70%, you know what I'm saying, into their side, or at least we had to be willing to do that a lot of times, right? That requires extra work. That requires the focus and the drive and the dedication to be able to do that, right? So, I think that's true. I think also one of the big issues I think that we face, and don't get me wrong, there's people that may not possess these skills, may not be able to get these skills, and everybody has their place, I think, in the fight regardless. But I think another one is, I want to say maybe empathy. Um, and it's because, oftentimes we're bombarded with arguments or positions based on emotions, based on feelings, right? Well, the problem with that is sometimes we're really quick to dismiss those because they're not fact. But the fact is that feelings and emotion are a real thing. And everybody has been overwhelmed with feelings or emotion at some point in their life, right? If you stop and you think about it, you understand that people can become, overwhelmed. And so if you understand that and you're a little more empathetic to, you know, I'm not saying justify or anything or anything like that or coddle anybody, but somebody that is afraid of firearms, let's say, because they had a uncle that committed suicide. That's a real thing. I mean, we've got to be able to address that on some level, those feelings and those emotions, right? Then we can, once we address that and we agree with them that, hey, what you're feeling is normal, you know, and maybe we've got personal stories we can share. Maybe we can, align with them on some other things and make them feel better. Then we can start talking about, we have program mechanisms within our community, right, to help deal with some of that. We can bring that stuff to light, right? Then I think the final component we hit on it earlier is technology. I mean, the anybody out there can create some type of social media account and almost instantly increase your voice. You may only increase it from the 10 people you normally talk to in a day to maybe 20 or 30, but that's threefold, two and threefold. So, learn to, and even if you are not the type of person that is a free thinker and comes up with great memes or great blurbs and posts that you write, right? Really insightful or inspiring. Get on these mechanisms, these platforms, and share other people's stuff. Share Edgar's stuff, share T Web stuff, share um, Kevin Dixie stuff, Tony Simon, whoever, right? Help. You can not only amplify your own voice, you can help amplify others' voices, which is just as effective, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we've got Amanda Suffolk is out. I think she's actually recording right now. So I appreciate her jumping in on the text side over on the Every Second Matters channel over there. So I'm going to try to include her comments because she's been addressing some of these things that we talked about. I'm going to go back to the first one. I think it kind of more fits with how do we navigate the election cycle and kind of where we diverted from there a little bit. And Amanda says, I think the growth of women shooting groups and I got to move this over to see it, and the growth of CCW in all the states work towards more relaxed gun laws. They are now saying, hey, that's my gun you're talking about. I think that's definitely a big portion, and of our change in method and in conversation with the ladies has been pretty impressive. Something that I'm definitely waiting for an appreciation of how woke the gun community is, because we went from tight shirts and boobs sticking out to pantsuits and Hillary Clinton looking owners of companies who just would look like, and now it's just ladies looking like how they feel like it, having a lot of fun, and it's just another fashion thing. Like, you can be into purses, you can be into shoes, you can be into holsters, you can be into guns, right? Like, it's becoming normalized through that whole level. So as far as skill sets, Amanda says skills. I got to move this thing over to see it because I got it so zoomed in. Even though I got a wide monitor, I have to learn to use it better. Amanda says skill sets needed: communication skills that include speaking to others in a manner where you bring them along, get them up to speed so they can be an asset also. I think she added, I'm trying to pull this from the YouTube thing, many folks talk down to others. I've had multiple times where folks have blown me, I got something in, like blown me off in a conversation because I did not think I got it or could keep up with the tech aspects. And that's something that's a tough one, because that's something that everybody's going to have their own experience for sure, right? And sometimes you got to go, hey, hold on, I know what you're talking about, so that people don't condescend or assume or whatever the words are. But those are great points. You may want to point on those or touch on those.
Especially the last part, right? This idea of learning how to speak to everyone. The thing that the two-way does that I expect better from the two-way in general is that we tend to follow mainstream trends. So we are very vocal and we say we don't want the mainstream. We're better than that, but at the same time, you follow that flow. And when I say this because it attaches itself to whatever is popular at that moment and disregards everything else that's not popular at that moment. And what tends to suffer is the growth in the gun community. So right now I'm struggling with Mexicans and Hispanics not being the popular narrative in the mainstream media. So we get ignored a lot. And not to say we have to play identity politics and shit like that, but I mean, humans by nature are tribalistic, and we like to see our own type of people doing the same type of shit. It makes us feel comfortable. So whether we like it or not, that's just ingrained in our nature. So I don't push just because I want to make this a race thing or a racial thing, or it's not about that, right? When you see somebody that looks somewhat like you, That's why it's we're making a big push at Guns for Everyone to hire a female instructor. It's not because I can't teach a female how to shoot. It's just they feel more comfortable if they're being taught by a female. It's just the way we are naturally, right? And what we tend to do in the Second Amendment is during Asian hate. We would just see Asian people on the cover of gun magazines and stuff like that, and on podcasts and shit like that, because it was a popular thing to do. During Black Lives Matter, we would pump up our black friends a lot more, and this is shit that we should be doing all the time, right? Like we should always be emphasizing the black community. We should always be emphasizing the Asian community. We should always be emphasizing female shooters. We should always be emphasizing these subcultures that exist within the gun culture. Again, it's not to be divisive. It's not to be racist or racial or any of that stuff. It's just to say we are an inclusive party, and we don't give a shit what the mainstream media is talking about. We are always in this together. But I'm telling you, during right now is here in a few months, quote unquote, Hispanic Heritage Month. You won't see me or any other Mexican on USCCA magazine. You're not going to see me on Recoil magazine. You're not going to see another Mexican on Recoil magazine, right? But during those moments, you'll see. And again, it sounds hateful, but it's not. It's just we got to be better. You will definitely see the homie Maj Touré on Recoil magazine, and during Asian or Pride Month, you'll see the homie Top Shot Chris on Recoil magazine. And because Mexicans and Hispanics are not the cool people right now, we don't get a spot on any of that shit, right? So I'm trying to fight against that, and we tend to hold on to whatever's popular, and instead of just saying, hey, we're all in this shit together, right? Like we're all part of this. We're all gun owners. We're all freedom lovers, and we're all fighting in this together. And it's a fine balance between being somebody who wants to advocate for that stuff. Like if we're all in this together, then we should all be in this together. We shouldn't be playing the same games that the mainstream media game. And then so it and that fine line of that's what I'm fighting for, and it's just like you just want Mexicans to be highlighted. That's just not it. We just kind of all have to, if we're supposedly better than the mainstream, then we shouldn't latch on to that stuff. And I think that's part of that mentality is just when you see somebody and get or hear about somebody being blown off because of the way they appear, or maybe they're not tactical enough, or you're a female and I'm a male, or whatever the case may be. Is just a lot of it is just we haven't snapped out of that Main Street pop culture mentality, even in the gun community.
I think I see a little different. I see it a little different way. You'll call it perspective maybe or something,
Mhm.
right? So I know I'm kind of this way, right? So if I'm this way, I mean, a certain amount of people is going to be the same way. That 2A is so. You mentioned the word inclusive. 2A really is, right? Like me and whoever that falls in whatever category, as long as we enjoy the Second Amendment, we enjoy firearms, we go to the range, we talk about firearms. We can align on absolutely nothing else, and we can go to the range and have a good time. And so it's really, it transcends all those boundaries, right? So if we're in a situation to where we advocate for something, we eat, sleep, breathe, live something that is so inclusive, is it possible that we inadvertently forget about certain groups because our mind is not on that? Our mind is on 2A. When I see Edgar, I think Edgar. I don't think Mexican. When I see Maj, I think Maj. I don't think black dude. When I see Chris, I see Chris. I don't see, you know what I mean? It's like I don't see that. When I see Amanda, I mean, maybe. But when I'm talking about woman, it's kind of hard to not distinguish between that. But you get what I'm saying, right? You are you first, right? It's like
Correct.
You're not. And so sometimes I think that I hear what you're saying, but I think that what happens is you've got people that they're not thinking on that level. And then when the mainstream starts to push a certain narrative around color or sex or religion or creed or whatever it
Right.
is, right? Then people start thinking about that. Like earlier, I put KD and Tony back to back when I mentioned people to support. I didn't do that trying to push a black narrative. That was the first two people that just come off the top of my head. I was thinking people doing the work, right? And so it, it, I think maybe it's a involuntary reaction sometimes to what they're pushing.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's what Edgar was saying, though. What I was going to answer what you're talking about is what when you're talking about what's the word, like the reflex or the unthought, what's the word, I can't think of the word, the unconscious reaction to what's presented to you. That's when what they decide to present to you is programming, and that's how they programmed, right? So the opposite of that is to, well, not just to do whatever the opposite is that they're programming, because that's just the other side of the tetherball game that they're playing, or the other side of the ping pong game. But the opposite of that is to think for yourself and to not play their games at all. I think that's what Edgar was saying, is if we just default to the, hey, we're playing football this season. Hey, we're playing this season. Hey, now it's the season to do this. Now it's the month to do that. Now it's your turn to do this. And you just reflexively, maybe that's what I was looking for, just do that crap, then that's bullshit. And that's part of the going along with the status quo and all that. And I think that in the gun community, I think along what Clover is saying is because it's foundational. And a couple other things. This is 2022. There's fewer gun ranges than there's ever been. There's fewer public places that we can go that there's ever been. So the gun community, being a person who likes guns and wanting to do something with that gun, you have to go to a place to buy it. You have to go to a place to shoot it. You have to go to a place to talk about it, right? And those places bring everybody together, and they give us an opportunity to learn about each other and who we are and what we value. And that's the thing that we can bring to 2022, is that instead of the old days where you could literally own a gun, go in your backyard, in your cornfield, wherever, right? Whatever place of the country you are, you could just live on your own property and be a gun owner by yourself. That's really difficult now, because you can't even go buy ammo in some places without having to go interact with other people. So that's an opportunity that we've got. And I think as gun people, we've got an opportunity that very few other realms have. I mean, motorcyclists, probably there's everybody in motorcycling, right? Probably everybody likes having fish tanks. Probably everybody likes eating tacos or whatever. But nobody is going to say, oh, you created a law against eating tacos or watching a fish tank? Oh, my goodness. And nobody's going to care, because there's not that many people, and it's not a foundational right.
Correct.
So the gun ownership gives us this foundational right that the antis have created an opportunity, this bottleneck, where we now have an opportunity as people who live in the United States, except for the people that got dragged over here unwillingly.
Correct.
Everybody else's parents decided to come here, and they came here because of the opportunities and because they wanted the opportunities in a place where people would be together with people who were willing to be with other people. You can get opportunities going to China. You're going to do it in a whole bunch of Chinese people and some foreigners. You can go a whole bunch of other countries, and it's going to be the predominant country, and then some foreigners. The United States is different. We're everybody, everything, all the time, different. And people came here, the people that came willingly because they wanted that. Some people were here minding their business, and then some people got dragged here, but then they decided to stay, and their descendants decided to stay.
Correct.
Because, to some extent, we appreciate this, the opportunity to work with each other. And gun shops, gun shows, conversations like this, the stuff that happens like 2A rallies. I don't care how much of this or that or the other you love or hate or whatever. You go to a 2A rally and your edges are getting knocked off. You're understanding shit. You don't like the little kids that are weird from Reddit. You don't like the old people that hunt. You don't like people that do this or dress their hair that way or wear pants like this or boots like that. Who cares? Because as fewer and fewer of us exist, we're getting along with each other, and the ones that ain't are super extreme and weird. And there's just not that many of them. There's just not that many of them. So it's an opportunity for us to come together. And I see that. And as Second Amendment advocates, again, in 2022, there's much fewer. I mean, the real lacking. There's only like a few places that we really lack. There's been people efforting for dozens of years in most areas, and at least 7 years in all the major areas. It's just a matter of awareness. So Second Amendment advocates, I think we do our best to just make others aware of the efforts that are out there. And luckily, for just about every realm, whether it be a region of the country or an area of shooting or a part of people who are pulling the triggers or whatever it is, there's going to be an option or two, right? There's almost all these organizations have had time to exist long enough for people to go, I don't like doing it the way you do it anymore. I'm going to do it my own way. And now we have two options, which is even better. And hopefully we'll have 3 or 4 for some of these things. But there's really a couple of things we're lacking, but there's so many things that we're not. I think awareness of that is one of the things. And then I just wanted to put out there, kind of going backwards, that without interrupting Edgar the first time, I think learning the social platforms as tools and using them, and kind of what Clover said to address both of those, to like add on to what both of them said, and Clover kind of addressed it. Even if you don't decide to turn on a camera or pick up a microphone or do anything else like blog or anything like that, just having an account and interacting with the platforms that you like, that you value, and clicking likes and subbing and sharing when you want to, doing what your level of comfort is with sharing what's out there, does wonders. That's really how the systems work, right? Is one person puts out some content and it gets distributed and goes viral. Well, it takes everybody else as the people that make it go viral. So realizing your position there, we don't all need to hold cameras or nothing. Those that are going to hold cameras, I agree with what those guys said. I just wanted to add to that.
Yeah. So we're in this, in that weird struggle, because I get what you're saying. I do want to kind of rebuttal to this a little bit. I get 100% what you're saying, Clover, about you as an individual, right? So when I talk about us collectively as a 2A, I'm speaking about the 2A in general, right? Like I understand from your perspective, but the way to get ignored is when people say, I don't see color, or I don't see gender, I just see a person.
Exactly. No, I agree with that. Yeah. No, I agree with that.
So that's a very easy way to get ignored, because again, you're Clover Tactical for a reason, right? It's not because you're from Brazil. It's because there's a heritage there. There's something that is attached to that Clover Tac, right? Which we appreciate and we celebrate, and it's an individual thing, and it's something that you're proud of, right? So it's one of these things that again, it's that fine line of, I don't want to make it about this, but I see everybody else being lifted up and being praised and being every ethnic group, right? Again, go to Recoil magazine, go to a lot of these magazines, go to a lot of these big time channels, and you will see a lack, you will see a gap, you will see them following the trends of the mainstream media. So at some point you get to wonder, like, hey, like, if we want to be different than the mainstream media, then we have to do shit differently than the mainstream media. So it's this weird fine balance of we don't want to play identity politics, because we really don't, because that's a slippery slope.
Right.
But at the same time, we do have to, because we are tribalistic. I mean, that's ingrained in us. We do also have to celebrate everybody that's included in that stuff, right? It's not something that we do all the time.
Yeah.
It's not what it makes the 2A. Guns make the 2A, and our love for that freedom makes the 2A. But it's just this happy medium of where it's at. And I just haven't seen it in the gun community. So this was just because that's how we end up with people getting blown off and being disregarded. And so it's an interesting conversation, and very nuanced conversation, one that I always like to have, though.
Well, I didn't say what I said. Right, to like argue.
Correct.
I mean, because I agree with you.
Yeah.
What I was wanting to make people aware of, because this conversation is being heard by obviously more people. So, but is that you're absolutely right, that if we are open and we don't see color and we don't see sexual persuasion and we don't see all of those things, right? We just see people for the individuals they are. We tend to celebrate individualism, right? And if we do that, then you're right. we lose out on opportunities by overlooking people that may fit into certain categories. It's a positive thing that we're so inclusive, but if we're not careful with that, right? You're absolutely right. I agree with you. That has a point where it becomes detrimental. That's kind of what you're saying, and we have to be aware of that. I agree.
Correct.
Well, I wanted to put in there just to the point where I think what you're talking about, Edgar, when you're talking about, or as you were saying this stuff before, is like the whole idea of like illegals and they don't want to bring up anything because of the border and blah, blah, blah. But my thing has always been, I live in Tucson, so, for some reason, everybody's constantly blabbing to me about it like they think I want to close the border all the time. But, I think we'd be a lot better off if we realize that the people, again, my thing is we're the country where people come to, and the people that are coming here ain't coming here because they were so well off and they hated guns. They're probably coming here to exercise a right that they share, that they want to have, right? Like that they feel they have, and they know in this country it'll be recognized. So I think that is a challenge and an opportunity, again, for the community would be to champion the everybody, whoever's coming from whatever country, because it's because at this point there's people coming from floods, there's people coming from war, there's people coming from the drug war, there's people coming from just bullies, right? There's people coming from crime, there's people coming because they just want to come here and be awesome in this country where we're capitalists and shit. And I think that, again, when we're talking in 2022, how do we change the game? Have Spanish speaking classes for, teach English and Spanish back and forth. So the Spanish native speakers teach the English native speakers how to speak Spanish, and vice versa. The English speakers teach the Spanish speakers how to speak English. We do that while talking about civics and joint things that we appreciate, the stuff that they might teach at Appleseed or the Paul Revere thing, right? The things that are foundational to the individual rights and the liberty that protects that, that kind of stuff. CCW classes, perfect opportunity. That's something that would be awesome. Wouldn't that be a cool thing to see in 2022? As far as like, let's see gun shops, I don't know, have some organization that facilitates that with some kind of workshops or booklets or some posters. And then boom, let's see that happen. And then try to tell us that we're afraid of people immigrating. I'm pretty sure we're all here from immigration, like say they're enforced or desired.
Yeah, correct. And it's a benefit for the Second Amendment, right? The Second Amendment, because that's ultimately the goal. The goal is to grow the Second Amendment and make it a strong, healthy amendment and a strong, healthy culture. The importance to that is evident because we live here, right? One of the things that I mentioned in the article that I wrote about the stuff that you do is whether you like it or not, the history of the 2A, like everything in your life, if you live in the U.S., whether you like it or not, the history of the 2A is embedded in that lifestyle. If you like to eat, if you like cars, if you like whatever it might be, because it was all obtained through guns, right? Whether because we had the guns and people are afraid to invade us, or because we had the guns to fight back when people did try to fight us. So it's this weird dynamic of the more accessible we make the 2A, the more people embrace it, right? In October, I'm going to be going down to Mexico to be doing some classes in Spanish. I'll be instructing down there, and a lot of the information that I'm taking is my Americanized version of guns, right? I am promoting the Second Amendment culture down in Mexico, where it's equal to one of our more restrictive states, right? If you think about New Jersey, Massachusetts, California, a little bit, it's pretty, people can own guns, but super restrictive. So we're trying to promote the Second Amendment down in Mexico. How does that benefit us up here in the U.S.? Well, it's called commerce. It's called an industry. The more these people are aware about this stuff, the more they consume G websites and Clover Tech, and they can participate in classes put on by Dixie, and classes put on by Guns for Everyone, classes put on by the Solutionary Center. So there's a lot of this stuff that kind of intertwines with not being so led by the mainstream and just doing what is valuable for the Second Amendment. They're just making it as accessible as possible to as many human beings as possible. There's a reason why I work with people that I don't agree with politically. I work with the Socialist Rifle Association. I'm not a socialist, far from it. But they like guns. These motherfuckers like guns. It's weird, but you hear them talk about you go left enough and you'll get your guns back. You won't get everything else back, but you'll at least get the guns back. And that's a means to kind of fight back for your freedom. It's this weird dynamic, but we don't wait for it to be popular in the mainstream to like commies. In fact, when we say we work with commies, often the response is, "What the fuck? You're working with these people?" Like we're proud of it because they like guns, right? We don't agree on anything else. Quite literally, we don't agree on anything else. But there's one thing we agree on, and that's guns. And if we're really guns for everyone, if we really believe in having that freedom for everyone, then that includes the fucking crazy ass commies.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the presentation, some people ain't gonna like the words or whatever, but it's legit. Like, let's take it to felons. So, some people are like, "Oh, felons shouldn't have guns." Guess what? Felons have guns right now. They're gonna have guns. They always have. They probably got some in jail. Like, that's just the way it is. Like, Al Capone and them kind of felons had guns. And, Colors and the movies of the '80s, those gangs had guns, and now the cartels got guns. And saying, and nobody wants to talk about it because they're not really gun owners. They're criminals, I guess. But they all got guns and they ain't killing themselves accidentally every day. Once in a while when they're drunk, I suppose, but they're
Correct.
probably carrying around guns just as much as cops and CCW holders. So they're just as aware of how to not hurt themselves with it. And, I'm saying, like, that's one of those things where once we understand that, we don't have to love it and agree with it. No, but I'm not condoning it, but I'm just aware of the fact that there's all kinds of gangbangers in every single state and every single city and every single area that have guns right now, and they're carrying them around illegally.
And by the way, there's a lot of ex-felons that you would classify under quote unquote the felons, but they should have the ability to legitimately defend themselves against the active criminal felons, the ones that are willing to take your life.
Well, let me ask the next question, because it's because that's seriously one. But the first question I asked is what skill set. So that's not really a skill set, but I think it is an issue. So I might have put out here like what issues are still out there. And when I think of issues, I think of the aging. What does our grandparents call it? Our parents and our grandparents are the giant boomer generation.
Yeah.
And as they get older and older and older and they become less able, that's a massive population that's going to want guns that are easy to use, get off of me guns, just whatever they are, single shot, like same way they want big fat markers and big fat remote controls and big fat alarm clocks. They're going to need things. And I can see that as an untapped market where they're going to need different types of training, right? Different types of situation. They've got drugs a lot of times, and they're unable to protect themselves. So they're going to become a more and more vulnerable thing unless the world gets really pleasant really fast and we do something about drug crime, drug addiction and crime, right? Because it's not the criminals, it's the drugs that are making them do this stuff. So once we get over that glitch, then we have a lot fewer of those kind of crimes. But the other crimes are the violent criminals that are fighting over the drug distribution or the sales and that kind of stuff. So anyhow, kind of went off on a tangent there. The next question is, what resources do 2A advocates need in 2022? Clover's been quiet, so I'll ask him first. What resources do advocates need in 2022? Now, this doesn't necessarily have to tie to anything we've already said. These are like 5 separate questions. Or feel free to tie it.
I think I don't know. When I think of that, I think the first is just resources. I don't know. Awareness, I guess, would be a resource, right? connections,
No, I'm going to call that a skill because I'm thinking
networking.
resources like money, stuff, time.
Well, I mean, money is a given, and money leads to time, right? So, I think that's got a big bold heading on number one on money, sure. And I've said it all along. A lot of people say, well, we need a Bloomberg, or we need a Soros, or we need a. It's like, no, we need 1,000 Bobs to step up with $10. That's what we need.
Yeah.
People don't realize, they think that you need one big sugar daddy with millions of dollars. Well, if you have millions of people with singles of dollars, you do the same amount of stuff. And look at the groundswell, look at the grassroots component of that, right? How is it hard to dispute? Like if you've got an anti-gunner funded by Big Daddy Bloomberg, right? And all of his money is coming from that. Well, he's doing the bidding of Bloomberg, right? But if you've got Edgar, who has a million contributors behind him, well, he's doing the work of the people. Like, literally, he's doing the work of the people, not the bidding of one person. And at the end of the day, people want to talk about democracy, which, I mean, we're a constitutional republic, but still, we hear that a lot. And there are elements of democracy interwoven in our system. But that's democracy. It's not one person controlling the purse strings, right? Or controlling the narrative because they're paying for it. It's, a bunch of people. And so, yeah, I think money's number one. But when you say resource, I mean, I get what you're saying with the networking and awareness and all of that being a skill set, but I think at some point it becomes a resource. And I think gee, where I'm going with this, because how many times have I had a conversation and you've been there with somebody and I'm like, crap, I know somebody you need to talk to, right? They needed a resource, right? And I couldn't provide them that resource, but I knew somebody that possibly could, right? So by proxy, that's not a resource, but just being aware that everybody exists, and having them in your phone, in your Rolodex, knowing at least a general. I don't know anything and everything Edgar does, but I know enough about what Edgar does that if I meet somebody that I'm like, wow, okay, this guy needs to talk to Edgar, this
Yeah.
gal needs to talk to Edgar, right? Then I'm going to tell them that. And I'm going to make that connection. And I think that's a resource. And the reason I say that's a resource is that it extends our knowledge base, right? Knowledge is definitely a resource. And that extends our knowledge base. We might not know everything, but by proxy, right? If we have all those connections, we do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm as far as resources, really, I think money is the simple and easy answer here. Is we've seen from a political standpoint, we've seen from an activist standpoint where it's super valuable. It's not the end all be all, but without the money, the financial resources, it is quite literally impossible to get very far. Guns for everyone. We do a lot of free concealed carry classes. We do about 5 to 10 a week. We can't get to 100,000 without money. Because at the end of the day, it's free for the students. It's not free for us, right? That's kind of the issue with free. It costs somebody something. It's not. It might be free to the end user, to the person consuming it, but it's not free to the people putting it on together. We understand this in when we hear about student loans being forgiven, or when the government wants to throw out billions of dollars or trillions of dollars in PPP loans and all that shit. Like, we know that money is not free. It's coming from somewhere. So the although not the end all be all, it's without money we can't do anything, man. We just simply can't. I do appreciate what Clover says, and that money should come from all of us together, so we don't end up with another Wayne LaPierre where it's only coming from one individual, but that motherfucker is spending it on his boats before he's spending it on the cause.
Yep.
That centralization of those finances are a killer, man. When you monopolize who distributes the money to the Second Amendment, they often tend to distribute to their mansions and their suits, and their collecting more money as opposed to sending it to the cause.
Yep. And you get a lot of waste, right? You're talking about that, especially when you're talking really big organizations. You get a lot of waste. You get a lot less transparency. It's like you probably couldn't get away if you had, like I was talking about, if you had 1 million people willing to put up $1 a month, right, for you. There's
Yeah.
no way you're going to be able to get away with $30,000 suits and trips to the Cayman Islands.
No.
You know what I mean? I mean,
No way.
those 1 million people are going to hold Edgar accountable. They are.
I apologize because I've been texting a little bit there, so I'm going to try to jump in and if I step on anything you guys said. But I think in 2022 for this, what resources do advocates need? I think more. I mean, I've been working on a knowledge of our past, because without an understanding of our past, it doesn't have to be from one source, but at least an understanding of our past that's complete. And even if there's debatable or challenges to a perception of some element of our past, I think we do better off if we all knew the timeline, we all knew the order of succession, we all knew the players, so that we're just all stronger going forward. Right now, our adversaries and those who exploit from within ourselves use it to our disadvantage, that we don't just know our own history and stuff like
Correct.
that. So I think that having some resources for that is critical. And there's just never been them. I don't think it's degraded, or it's just nobody's ever really created them. And I don't know if that's by itself going to solve everything. I just think that that's one of the answers that I would give this, aside from funding and stuff. And then as far as resources, we need leadership at a national level. We have too many players, a lot of chiefs, and nobody playing calls. I don't know what it's called in sports. Whoever it is that makes the plays. Is that the quarterback or the coach or whoever? I just don't know sports, but we need the person who makes the plays, who understands what the capabilities are of the elements, and then knows tactics and strategies of the antis or our adversaries, and then makes plays. And I don't want a sports person, because those are usually weak, and they're usually, just single focused, who believe in game play where you win with a finish line or a score. We need military strategists who think long term. You win this by being in the game tomorrow. You win this by carrying on the fight to the next generation effortlessly. We win by making guns normal again. With that kind of military strategy or tactic, I believe what we need is a national level leadership, not anymore of this. Oh, we're lawyers, so we want to do lawsuits, and we do lobbying, so we want lobbying. We do advocacy, so we want advocacy. I'll do everything. Do your thing and do it well. Now let's think about everybody's trying to get their own funding. That's stupid as hell, because now they're fighting with each other. And then you've got people in certain states that Edgar might know that suck $16 million out of the industry. And as soon as someone challenges them on gloating about it, they get fired. So we're talking about people, we've got elements that are able to harvest money out of our group, out of our community, out of our culture, that are not known because we don't have any kind of national level leadership that pays attention to that. And it's not like the NRA did that and is gone. The NRA was doing good at lobbying, but obviously that's a battleship that was going in a direction, and they didn't ask people what direction they were going to go in. They just went in a direction, and certain people went with them or kind of went in their direction, and other people, didn't. And that's fine. We need all these different tactics, but at some point we do need at least a group of generals to get together at some point, or somebody to start doing something, because we need something more than just random happenstance and reaction, which that's what Edgar was kind of talking about earlier, I think, too, is we become susceptible because right now all we do is amplify jerk reactions and congratulate financially the first person to react to everything. Oh, you're the first person to react. You're the first person who told me about this. Ding, 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 ding. Well, that's not what we want. We want the first rational opinion. We want the first actionable call to action, right? We want the first strategy. We don't want just the first person to observe. As far as funding and stuff like that, though, I guess I was going to say we've got Bitcoin coming. This is 2022. We've got decentralized funding. We've got people that made $1 zillion in the cyber world. Oh, Cobra had to jump out. We had a bunch of people that made a bunch of money in the cyber world, and then they can't use it because of whatever. Like they don't want to pull it out or they can't. So why not redistribute that? Or, what do we have over there? As far as, again, like in the 2020, we have potential for fun, for what is that called? When you put a bunch of money into a pile and then you have a group of people, trustees, that determine how to invest it so that it grows, and you invest it in the community, and then you give out grants appropriately, strategically, and maybe you accomplish my first requirement by having leadership, and then at the same time you create funding. But now everybody has a place that they know they can throw money into. Maybe it's an investment thing. Everybody says, oh, I'm going to invest in the big 2A fund, the hedge or whatever. I don't know what they're called, but like somebody in banking can tell me what the fund. And then they invest in Smith & Wesson and all these companies that are important for our industry. And then they take that money and the some of it goes back to make sure it stays, what do they call that? A trust or a fund, so endowment, so that it stays there forever.
Correct.
And then it always grows, and they take whatever extra can be surgically removed and distributed so that you create strategically new layers of the community. And what's stopping us to have one of those? Why isn't there one of those for the people that like revolvers, and one for people that like shotguns, and one for people that like CCW, and one for people that want to get rid of the NFA?
We're too cliquey. We love clicks,
for sure.
And that's part of the reason why it can't happen, right? Like we've tried to we bitch about stuff, and then when the solution comes about, well, my person didn't do it, so I don't like that. It's not my person. I'll wait until my person does it. So we're very much like that in the Second Amendment, and we don't grow. One thing that the Democrats have down, that because I've ran for office twice. I'm not very proud of saying this, but I was part of Romney's campaign. This is when I was fully into politics and all of that shit. And one of the things that I've always envied from my Democrat counterparts, because I seen them work and I would meet them, and there was a lot of respect among them, and as humans anyways. And one of the things that they always did is, for better or for worse, they always backed whoever the person was, right? They always collectively said, you're not my actual person, but like, I'm gonna support you 100%. The conservatives, and I'm not saying all gun owners are conservatives, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we tend to follow that type of strategy in the gun community. It's just not very organized. If you look at how amazing the BLM movement was and the Antifa movement was, and I mean, these motherfuckers were tearing shit down and saying, no, we're just protesting. And the same shit happened at the Capitol. Now, I'm not saying one's better than the other one, one's worse than the other one. I'm not here to give a political analysis about that shit. I'm just saying, optics wise, they kind of look the same. People breaking shit that they probably shouldn't be breaking, or people doing shit that they probably shouldn't be doing, but one of them has trials and the other one doesn't. Well, one of them presented the image, presented the idea a lot better than the other one. The one of them was on the defense all the time, and that's what it seems that the gun community is always doing, is playing defense, because we're always cliquey. So when you talk about why don't we have this other crowdfunding type situation where we could just throw money at this and then we decide the 2A stuff, like that, it's a genius idea, right? But we're cliquey. That's how you end up with sex all over the place. Sex is SECT. All over the place. I'm not suggesting orgies all over the place, although my even for me, my accent kind of suggested that. But you end up with little groups all over the place that are always constantly fighting each other. I mentioned this last time that I was with you on the other show, talking about those motherfuckers that stole my idea for the Gundies. We did the Gundies. not too much support behind our Gundies, and then some other people decided to do the Gundies, essentially steal my idea and do the Gundies. I was bitter about it, but I have to admit they did it better than I did. So it's just like I didn't do much more than just let that shit run, because I have two options. So like I don't have to participate in it, right? Because I'm still mad that they stole my idea. But let it flow, let it do, or I could be just bitter and try and stop it because it's not my people, right? So unfortunately, that's not the way the Second Amendment works, and we can't. Excuse me, we can't be like that. We need to stop it, and that includes checking myself, right? We can't be so cliquey and only root for one side or the other. But it's a very long-winded way to say I think that's why it would never work in the Second Amendment, the whole funding stuff, because it's not my person doing it.
I hear you. And I think I don't disagree. I mean, definitely it's the way that it's been, but I just like I'm not doom in the future, because I think there is an opportunity, especially when you feel like your back's against the wall and, there's no, what do they say, there's no atheists in a foxhole or something. It's like different when you've been through something with somebody,
Correct.
whether it's, you sometimes just a layover, like y'all are at the airport together and y'all had to spend 6 hours in an airport unexpectedly and nobody was really leaving because you didn't know when the plane, and y'all ended up having this bond. And maybe it's only
Correct.
a 6-hour bond, but if you ever saw that person again, you'd have lunch with them. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like you've bonded a little bit, and we've got that opportunity. And I really think that, again, because the way gun shows have been thrashed around, it's just one of my things. I've enjoyed gun shows my whole life, so I've kind of always been paying attention to their kind of evolution, as I don't want to call it, like, the coming and goings of gun shows. I really see the evolution of gun shows. You've seen like the Clash Bash and the Red October, how crazy they are, like evolution. And, I could see guns bringing people together. And I really think that, again, all it really would take is just some effort from media people. Right now, I'm always amazed. I'll find another channel that's talking about grip angles. I use grip angles and red dot optics as my just go-to things to complain about, because you can complain about the material, you can complain about the models, you can complain, there's always these things when we're talking about machines. Just like if we were talking about trucks, we could talk about wheels or engines or strategies on how to climb rocks or do mud or whatever it is we're doing, right? So instead of just getting into all of that, I'll find a new channel that is talking about, the shortages of ammo or just something dumb that's been overdone so many times. And I'm thinking, all it would take is for, like you're saying, just a kind of a culture shift or whatever, enough people to be frustrated with those kind of videos. And that will saturate. I tell you, that will saturate. I've been around YouTube and the internet long enough to know that this stuff is cyclical, and people who are new to guns will get sick of the basic stuff and they'll want to they want to dive in. And some of them will go towards, oh, I didn't know, like, I don't know, I got to pick something. Like, I didn't know that France had guns and now I can dig into guns from France, or I don't know that so-and-so had guns and I can dig into, so there's going to be some evolution. I just hope that it creates a mixing also. And then that would be, again, an opportunity for gun owners to realize this. And that's hopefully just by saying this, right? I was going to say too, that I don't disagree with you. That's the way it's been. I'm hoping that by making it known and by at least saying it, somebody out there goes, you know what? I don't have to do it that way. I can consciously make a decision and not act in reflex this time. And once enough people do that, they go, I don't know what is the traditional way anymore. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it the way I feel like doing it.
Correct. And that's constantly the fight, right? It's just like, well, that's what people do. And that's a horrible reason to do stuff. I'm not a gamer in any way, shape, or form. I started playing video games because that's what my kids like, and I used to talk shit about them for watching people play games, which is a stupid fucking thing that kids do, is they watch other people play games. So I had a choice, right? I keep talking shit about them, potentially alienating them, or I can play games with them and see what the fuss is all about. So I started playing with games with them. And that's one of the things that my son brought up, was like, well, that's just how the pros do it. I'm like, well, yeah, that's never a good reason to do it that way, right? Because it becomes this this mentality that there's only one way of doing stuff.
Like an assumption, like that's the path because that guy did it.
Correct. And that's such a horrible, horrible way of thinking, that it's only one way and it's very linear and that stuff. It's well, why? Let's try some different shit. Let's make this better. Let's make this more dynamic. Because if we're only doing it one way and we're stagnant and we're stuck, then obviously something's missing here. Something's not amazing. And I'm not a fan of that philosophy. I'm not a fan of that way of thinking. That's just the way we do it. I think that's dumb.
I always liked respect your elders, but question the tradition.
You have to. You 100% have to, man. Cars used to be sexy, super, super sexy, right? I think much more personality than we have right now, but I sure do appreciate the gas mileage that we get in today's cars, and the safety features that we have in today's cars.
I was thinking about that the other day on the highway. Like, that lady is talking on her phone because she doesn't even realize how safe she is. Like, she doesn't even care. You know, she's got airbags from every direction. She'll ruin her car, but she'll be fine. She'll walk away from that, right? And back in the day, if somebody was neglecting, you know, they would have died for sure, right? When a 50s car hits the embankment, it's just, anyway, yeah.
And then that's just that mentality, right? Like, I could appreciate old cars and understand how stupid they were. Like, if you really think about it, they were dumb. Like,
and they just didn't know, right? Like, there was no seatbelt file because nobody thought about it. And then as soon as somebody figured it out, it probably took a little while. I remember hearing, "Oh, you're going to cut your head off if you put your seatbelt on."
and that's just, it comes with the territory, right? Of advancing and having new technology, and you're always going to get people pushing back, but we have to, right? Like, we got to stop the clicky stuff. We got to support even the people that we hate. Like, one of the things that we kind of could talk about right now, and I don't want to make it about that, but like, I remember when I first came in, Jaeger, holy shit, a lot of people disliked this guy, right? A lot of people were saying stuff about Jaeger, and then I almost fell into that same wagon of like, well, I'm gonna hate him, and why? Just because people hate him, and that's it, right? No other reason, and that's just dumb. So I had to like back up and talk to people that actually knew stuff, and then come to find out he's a great guy and just heavily misunderstood. But if you don't, if you allow that bias to sink in, then you're never willing to become a person who learns new techniques, who learn new stuff, who um is on the correct path, right? There's got to be something where it's just like, you've reached the end and this is the truth, this is the fact, and I know that from training. You get to a point where it's just like, I think for this particular thing, we have reached the fact, right? Like, there's no more arguing about that shit. This is the fact. But the only way we get that is by not being so fucking clicky, by being so fucking stuck in our old ways. So there's better.
Well, and I think that the ultimate is, this is the way to do it, and then the ultimate realization is, this is the way to do it now, or for me, right? Like, there's that qualification, and that's what you're saying, was like being adaptive and understanding that you don't have to be, the rigidity is necessary occasionally, but it's, you know, not the only value.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's two more questions, and I am trying to dodge the thing, because when you talked about Jaeger, I don't know how well you knew James. He has passed, for people that don't know. I didn't want to bring it up, but mainly because he wants people to talk about the good times with him, and I plan to do that tonight. So I don't know how well you've known him or whatever.
I actually didn't know him.
Okay, so whenever in 2012, I actually sat down with him and helped him kind of make a decision to play around with the YouTube and whatnot. And at least, you know, once he had already kind of made the decision, kind of helped him with my knowledge of YouTube. And his thing is, he played around with it. So yeah, you would have had to, if on the surface, if you took him on the surface, he didn't really care about his surface, so he would play with that, and he'd allow that to allow views and the YouTube mechanism to work. And just like people bouncing around a beach ball at a concert, you know what I'm saying? Like he just allowed that to happen and didn't really pay much attention because he was an authentic dude, and or is an authentic dude, and the community and stuff that knew him knew that. So there was just sort of a thing where the people that hate him with a passion are kind of spinning off on their own perceptions. Like, you know what I'm saying? He never had to do much to feed it. But anyway, and it's interesting because what we're talking about as far as the 2A community and that kind of thing is he was actually kind of a master at that. And by doing it the way he did it, in fact, literally everything he did all the way up to passing and just choosing and deciding to do it the way he did that as an example for everyone. You can respect it. You can take the example. You can, appreciate it or not, but it happened. And there's going to be people from now on who've seen someone, authentically pass on YouTube as a man. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, no, it's and that was one of the things, right? Is just because I didn't know him, I had to make that because I bet you a lot of people that are talking shit are exactly the same people that never met him, never any of that stuff. I never had the
realize, but it's an interesting dynamic there and it's not all that important. It's just that it is totally apt because obviously the timing and everything, and it's just such a perfect example of that example of people just blindly accepting and not even paying attention. But that's also what the internet's all about, is now that it's happened, people have the opportunity, and that's what will happen. And he's a genius. He's a master in a lot of ways. Now people have the opportunity to hear all the stuff that all the reach, all the impact he had on people, and they'll be able to privately question and make another decision. And we have that ability as humans to go, oh, I don't think the same way as I did yesterday or 10 minutes ago. I'm going to decide to think differently. And once we figure out that in one way, we know it in all ways. All right. So the next question is best 2A accomplishment of 2022 so far.
Oh, that's easy. That's Bruin, right?
Okay.
If you're speaking personally, that may be a different thing, but like for 2A, Bruin, I mean, that's 100%.
So here's my thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to refuse to call it Bruin because that's just the secretary, something like that. I'm going to start calling it the New York State Rifle decision, because that gives us an option to say all that. But because Bruin, there's like 2 other Bruin decisions for one. Plus, he's the guy who was against us, so I don't want to make
Fair
him
enough.
Right? I'm saying.
Fair enough.
Okay, so that's I didn't even actually think about that because I was just trying to think of questions. So I don't have anybody else here to ask. I don't think I have anything bigger than that, really. I mean, I think train and learn is a big thing. You didn't go this year?
We sponsored it.
Right. But, I think train and learn is unique in that, KD brings people in. I mean, there's the Ambassador Academy, and there's a Girl in a Gun, and then there's AmCon. So there's at least those 3 that I know of. And then smaller things probably, or, more like roundtables and stuff that might happen specifically for activism. But nobody's bringing the kind of thing that KD's bringing together for the low cost. And
it's pretty accessible, right? And
it's so well-rounded, I think is the way to say it. Like, it's accomplishing so many things at once that.
Correct. I think if you're new to the,
that was what I would probably put in there if Bruin didn't happen.
Yeah, I think if you're new to the gun industry, the train and learn is definitely a place to go. We were proud to sponsor it this year. Most likely going to sponsor it next year as well. So, and that's the way they keep their cost down, right? Is they have companies like USCCA and Brownells, and we were lucky enough to be a part of that sponsorship group. There's a lot of other companies that are involved in this to make sure that it's a low cost thing. But if you're brand new to the gun industry, more specifically as a business owner, I'm not saying activists can't go there. It's a great way to learn. That's in my opinion better time and money spent than that SHOT Show, for sure, 100%. SHOT Show is what it is, and we got to respect it for what it is. But I hear a lot of people like they want to go learn and they want to go do stuff, and it's just so overwhelming that a lot of people don't even get to do that stuff. So I think Train and Learn is small enough that it's not overwhelming, and it's full enough that you get a lot of information from the people there. So it's one of those things where we for me personally, right? I don't know what KD's visions for this is, and he shouldn't care about what my vision is, but like I'd hate to see it grow, because then you kind of lose its uniqueness, because it is so accessible, right? Not just financially, but you're able to talk to everyone there. It gets to a point where it's so big that it just becomes super overwhelming. So I think it's at a perfect spot.
Worst loss for 2A in 2022 so far.
The privately made, the frame decision was pretty bad. But now the whole, you got to register your braced gun, that one's kind of a weird one as well. So I think the worst loss is just, I'm just gonna say, the amount of power the ATF has exerted, and it's gone unchallenged so far.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to just try. I'm trying to type some of this stuff. So the amount of flex that the ATF is.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's like the bully that started taking people's lunch money and realized he could get away with it. And now he's taking everybody's fucking money.
And, bullies are going to be bullies. Hold on, I can't talk and type at all. So bullies are going to be bullies, but the worst part, I mean, we basically had effectively the same answer, is that they're not doing nothing about it. Because my answer was going to be, I mean, there's a lot of black eyes, I'll give you. We got the one hand job or whatever. I guess it's a longer lasting thing than that. We got the power up or whatever with the New York State Rifle Business Association decision. And we got black eyes with this other stuff. It's interpretations by the executive branch. So the amount of people that are complaining and being butthurt about it is infuriating, because it's something that's going to be reversed immediately when we pressure on it. And that's what I'm going to complain about, is that there's no, kind of going back to what I was complaining about before, I guess, there's no leadership or no kind of structured response to this, to just take the overwhelming resources that we have available to us. We don't even need anything more. We just need to use more effectively what we've got, strategically what we've got, and we haven't done anything.
Yeah.
And since they see no resistance at all, they're just laying it on more, and all we're doing is observing them do it. And yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. That's my word. Just all the different resolutions, but I think I agree with you that the last part is my answer, that we didn't do nothing to all this shit that's happening. But you're right, the stuff that's happening is annoying as hell. And I don't know that. Well, I don't know. So I don't want to keep talking here, but we've gone about 2 hours. I don't know if we cut any of these things off, that or if you wanted to add anything to any of the pieces here. Kind of been wandering a little bit, kind of briefly, kind of jumping between these 5 questions throughout the 2 hours.
Nah, I'm good. This is always good.
I never know if I'm about to. I try to leave notes, so I don't know sometimes when I'm going into something here that I'm cutting somebody off. So I always like to, just in case, so you want to finish something, give you a chance for that. Otherwise, I want to thank you for showing up. I do want to cut it off so that we don't go all evening. I'm sure there's other things going on a Friday night. It is a holiday and everything. Thanks to Amanda Suffolcool for jumping in on the tech side, and then Clover for jumping in earlier. Thanks to everybody who showed up live. But now, Edgar, if you would, give us an elevator speech about what all you've got going on, and take as much time to plug anything else you might want to plug out there on our way out.
First, I appreciate the support. There was a few comments of support, so I appreciate those of you that are supporting. Gunsforeveryone.com, GFEnational.com. On gunsforeveryone.com, we also have the Gazette. Usually I don't put it online until a couple weeks after the print version has gone out. But there is a Gazette, an actual newspaper that we print out every single month, and we are trying to get it in as many states as possible. Right now, it's just in Colorado, so that's kind of what we're up to. We're working on Spanish content over at personaldefensenetwork.com. So if you're interested, if you got friends that are Spanish speakers and want that information or know anybody, Personal Defense Network, I'm working with them on creating this content. So that's a little bit about what we're working on.
Right on. Barbecue had asked a question. Someone else will ask it, and you know more about this probably than I do. I only know of the Train and Learn, but Barbecue is asking, in a recent interview, KD said the Train and Learn builds off the previous year's Train and Learn as far as its curriculum. So do you see a time where the new people would be too far behind the ball to attend? Like, will it kind of progress to an advanced level or something?
I don't think so. I think it's so geared towards the beginner, the let me rephrase that. It's so geared to the first day for business development, and I think they do a good job in being sensitive to those that are pretty new to this stuff. So like this year they were talking about social media marketing and sending out press releases and how to work with the media and that type of stuff. So there was a lot of great information that would be good for anybody at any level. So I don't see that happening at the Train and Learns. Just the way they get structured and the type of information that they talk about the first day. Maybe the range day, maybe it gets to that point, but even then I just don't see it. It's a big maybe on that one. Because the second day this year was really more shooting and learning self-defense techniques with the instructors there, and there was a few people that were so new to guns that were probably more business owners than they were gun owners, that was maybe a little difficult for them, but it wasn't anything that the instructors there couldn't handle or couldn't work around. So I think it's really more of an individual thing as opposed to a in general thing. So I think I don't see that happening. So
Right on. And as you were just explaining that, it makes it seem like as somebody who was new was also an opportunity for the people that have been around a while to catch them up. Right?
correct.
And you kind of get a fast forward as a new, I would assume you're going to get like a fast forward as a new person.
Yeah, and the information is it's not like a level up type thing. So I think maybe that's the maybe the misunderstanding, like it's not a level one. Oh, you had to be here for this or anything like that. It's just general business information. Business people have been in the business for a while, sharing their knowledge with other people that are trying to start
Like
a
if you
business.
talk about YouTube this time and you talk about Instagram next time, it's not like it's an advanced YouTube class. It's just something different that
Correct.
wasn't addressed the first time.
Correct.
Or
Exactly.
like if it was pistols and rifles this time and it's shotguns and revolvers next time, it's not like it's advanced pistol where now you're behind the
Correct. Correct. So it's it's growing in the sense of it's getting better. I'll say that. People who went to the very first one and people this year and last year will tell you that every year is just getting a little bit better. So that's always a plus.
So I did have a poll going on the YouTube side. Let's just do a poll while we're live like this. So I asked people, how was August for Second Amendment? Was it a great month, a good month, an okay month, or a bad month? Edgar, how would you answer? How would you have answered that poll?
I think it was good. Yeah, there was nothing atrocious. I think overall it was good.
Well, we had the 24th was the one.
Oh, that's right.
That's
Correct.
put it, okay. I mean, I don't want to call it bad because it is bad, but we handled it okay. We didn't freak out. We could have handled it a lot worse. I try to think of sometimes what would happen if Hillary was in there or something, right?
And
Like,
we just got a partial injunction on that, didn't we?
I don't even know. Oh, you mean the
FPC did, right?
No, I haven't read any news, so I guess I don't know. We're
Yeah,
talking
I thought
about which one?
I thought maybe if you've got time, I'm gonna try and
Yeah, I don't mind. But no, I've just been doing some other stuff off non-gun related, so I hadn't been paying attention to news.
FPC secures partial or preliminary injunction and lawsuit challenging ATF frame or receiver rule. So it seems like today, it's on their Instagram. I don't. There's a lot of words.
So that's good to hear, and that's the one that allegedly was going to the new interpretation or new rule change
Correct.
or whatever that was going to take place on the 24th.
Correct.
FPC, the Firearms Policy Coalition, put forth law, paperwork, whatever, to say we don't like this. We're going to challenge it. Therefore, you can't enforce it until we've had our chance in court.
Correct.
Like that.
Correct. And it's
Awesome.
just a partial injunction. I haven't read it. I just remember seeing that today. So
Right on. And that's basically one of the recourses we've got.
correct.
And see, again, that would be great if we had, well, what I'm going to effort for is have something like, I don't know what it's called because I'm not into sports, but I know if I'm shortcutting in Vegas and I want to get somewhere in some of the hotels, I got to cut through the sports place, and they'll have like a giant thing on the board, a giant sports scoreboard or something up there that's got like every result of every game and every horse race and everything anybody could ever want because they're betting on everything. We need that for 2A. Like they just need a giant scoreboard that gives us a tally of where everything's at, you know, what's hot, what's moving, you know, maybe like what stock people look at for their stocks and bonds and stuff. But
that is a good idea.
Anyhow, so with that, thanks again. We almost knocked it right at the 2-hour mark. I do appreciate you taking time out of the day and the month, I guess, to do it. I'll put you on the list. Try to invite everybody, like I mentioned at the beginning, to give us a roundtable and not to talk about necessarily news of the day, at least not react to news of the day, but instead try to offer some different positions, different points of view on what's happening, and some different tactics to go forward. And then I like to also give as much thanks and appreciation to those who are out there efforting, because there are a lot of people accomplishing stuff that a lot of conversations say should be getting done. And that's just a miscommunication, just unawareness. And we can end that by using these social platforms more effectively like tools.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we're like, oh, I'm going to reload because my 9mm doesn't hit, or, isn't as fast or as accurate as I want. So I'm going to reload the perfect. Well, if you're not getting what you want out of your social platform, put some effort into it. Help keep the ones that you're interested in front of more people. And what you'll end up with is more of the stuff that we appreciate out there. All right, I'll quit preaching and we'll end it. Thanks for watching.